Hey everyone, and welcome to this wonderful Friday. It is January 19th, and I am so very excited to hang out with my good friend and just tarot extraordinaire, Miss Theresa Reed, the tarot lady. Hi, Theresa. Thank you so much for coming and chatting with me today.
Hey, Jenna, I like any excuse to hang with you, so thank you for inviting me to this.
Absolutely. It's Gemini powers activate today. Extra stars if you're a Gemini coming in
hmm
live. Welcome
And
to
it
those
is
of
like
you
we're doubling their pleasure.
and doubling the fun. Too
hmm
funny. There's already a good number of people live. Welcome to all the people that are live. Feel free to comment in the chat box. And a special welcome for those of you who are going to tune in later. So Theresa Reed, in case you guys don't know her by now, has been a tarot baddie from the beginning, working, reading for clients for many years. She was one of the few full-time tarot clients that I connected with when I started in the industry. There's not many of us, and not many of us for long. For a lot of reasons, but you got to be in it. If you love it, you're going to stay. Let me tell you guys a little bit about Theresa Reed. She has been just extraordinary with the books and the things she's put out in the last few years. She's the author of the Tarot Coloring Book, Tarot for Troubled Times, wonderful, Astrology for Real Life, Twist Your Fate, Manifest Success with Astrology and Tarot, Tarot, No Questions Asked, Mastering the Art of Intuitive Tarot Reading, Tarot for Kids, love that deck, and the cards you're dealt, How to Deal When Life Gets Real, which I have. We're gonna definitely talk a little bit about this. And then also we're going to talk about her most recent tarot journal, which came out. Does it come out at the end of last year? When did it come out?
It came out, I think, the same day as the cards are dealt,
Oh, did
or
it really?
shortly
Sydney?
thereafter. Yeah, like October. So October was like, oh my God, both of these things are coming out. So it was a very busy, busy month for me.
And I mean, you are in typical Gemini in fashion. You do tarot, do astrology. I don't know too many tarot readers that really kind of dance in both worlds as competently as I see you do. And then you taught yoga for years. Don't know if I mentioned that. So welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And tell us a little bit more about you. Anything else you want to share, or you kind of want to get started?
We can get started. I mean, you pretty much covered me pretty well, so I appreciate that. I would say also I am a known cat lover, and just so folks know, Jenna, before we came on live, you had that cute little cat with the little turban and the little crystal ball with the fish in it. That was the cutest thing ever. So I am a massive cat fan, and that is something everybody else needs to know. I think they need to know that.
Yes, absolutely. I now have 9 cats. Well, they're outdoor cats that now
Mhm.
have the bougiest heated shelters you've ever seen, and they're kind of our cats, and I'm just like, "No more. How many can I have? How many can you fit?" It's getting kind of wild. But I mean, they're kind of like potato chips. You can't just have one. There's always another one that's going to come that you also want. So we're both cat
Especially those
lovers. Huh?
Yep,
Say again?
especially those wild cats. We had a gang of cats living in our
Mhm,
garage
mhm.
until my husband put a window and blocked it out. But one day, because the window was broken, so they got in there, they were living in there. And one day I was coming out to the backyard and I saw some of the cats in a tree. And then all of a sudden, this cat comes leaping out of the window like this over me and into the tree with the other cats, and they took off. And that's when he decided we can't have this gang of cats taking over our property.
Yeah, and you're in Milwaukee, so you guys get cold winters, so they're
Yes.
definitely trying to find every little spot to hold up. How is it for you right now? Are you in that cold snap that we're
Yep.
experiencing? Oof.
Super cold. It's really bad. In fact, I went out today, and today's actually we're having a good day. It's like 12 degrees. And so I was out today and I'm like, oh my God, I actually have to wear gloves. And by the way, for folks who know me really well, I'm a very hot-blooded person. So I love cold weather. Cold weather means I'm not going to sweat. And you notice I'm in a t-shirt. So I'm like perfectly fine. But when I was outside, my hands were not happy. They rebelled. So it's cold.
They were
It's
like, "We're drawing the line
cold.
here, woman." Yeah, I live in North Carolina now, and I think my blood is definitely, like, thickened up, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"I can't take this," and it's like 40 degrees. It's terrible, I know, I can't believe it. Um, but I wanna talk about, these last 2 books, like, the the cards you're dealt with and then tarot journal.
Mhm.
They're really just such introspective pieces of using tarot for our own self-reflection and our own self-work. And, I wanted to know if there was anything astrologically or otherwise going on for you that kind of took this in this direction and in this way.
Mm. Well, first of all, like a true moon in Scorpio, I'm a very introspective person.
Mhm.
I love to spend time alone. I've always been a big journaler. I love to write. I like to process things. And, when I was growing up, everybody thought it was weird because I grew up in a household of extroverts.
Mhm.
And I'm an introvert. I like being by myself, and it was very challenging. My
Mm.
mother used to say, "Why are you sitting around with your nose in a book? Why don't you go out and play with other kids like a normal kid?" And I was like, "I'm not a normal kid, and I don't fit in with this crew." So the
Mm.
introspection thing has just always been my jam. I love to meditate. I like to reflect. I like to just sit around thinking, which again seems weird to people, but that's just the way I operate. I'm very much into living in my head. And that's just something I want to preface this with. But the reason why I wanted to write The Cards You're Dealt, and The Cards You're Dealt, by the way, is a book I wanted to write for some time.
Mhm.
Because one of the things that I've noticed with many of the books that are out there on tarot, there are lots of books that tell you how to read tarot. There are lots of books that tell you the basics, like what this card means, or maybe they cover a lot of spreads. But one thing the cards don't prepare you for, or tarot world doesn't prepare you for, is the real life stuff you're going to deal with at your tarot table or in your own life. Now, I'm going to be 60 next year, and I've seen a lot of things in my life. And one of the things that I've done is I've gone through a lot of really heavy things in my existence here on the planet. Illness, caregiving, dealing with many, many deaths in the family, my parents passing away, my children's father passing away. So there's this theme in my own life where I've
Mhm.
had to deal with a lot of heavy stuff, and tarot has always helped me.
Ah.
And it's always been my thing. It's always been my ally. I always know that when things are going rough, I can turn to my cards, I can journal about it, I can process it. But the other thing I noticed is that people don't come to tarot readers for the reason people think they do. The media thinks it's like we're all coming there to talk about some guy who's going to come into your life with a glass slipper. And sometimes, there is the entertaining thing that people come for. But
Mm.
a lot of the times people come to us when they're in crises, when they're going through heavy stuff.
Mhm.
And, I know that over the many, many years when I used to read tarot for the public, I wasn't always doing these love readings. I was doing a lot of readings about the very stuff I was going through or that I've been through: loss of a loved one, pregnancy loss,
Mhm.
grief. I've helped people process a lot of really heavy stuff, and the tarot table has always been a safe space for that. But this is stuff that I had to learn through trial and error and
Mhm.
my own life experiences, because there's nothing that tells you how to deal with that when it comes to your tarot table. And I also, so that's again the big reason why I wanted to write the book. But I also found that I would come across clients sometimes who would go to a well meaning reader with this heavy stuff, and the reader would give them a reading that caused harm.
Yes.
And you and
Yes.
I have had conversations about stuff like this before.
Mhm.
So I wanted to write The Cards You're Dealt because I do think there needs to be a book that gives professional readers the
Mhm.
advice and skills so they don't cause harm. It
Yes.
has readings in there, different spreads, so they can deal with every situation. So, for professional readers, this book is going to help you to deliver the readings in these heavy circumstances and also to take care of yourself at the same time.
Mm.
And then for people as individuals who just are dealing maybe with grief, this is also a book
Mhm.
that shows you how you can use tarot to help you process things. So that
Mhm.
was the big method. And I'm just grateful that Wiser said yes to this book because it's not a sexy topic.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. I gotta tell you, when I saw your title, The Cards You're Dealt, I was like, "Damn, that's a good title." I was like, "That is genius. That title is so good." Um, I really feel like it's a book that helps people know what to do with their empathy and also their empathic nature because yeah, you're right, we've both been full-time readers, and when we talk about harm, right, reader harm, I
Mhm,
think the tendency, and every human has it, not just readers, but the tendency that when someone is going through something very difficult, and I had a chronic illness that made me very ill for a very long time, and I really learned a lot from that because
mhm,
people would be like, "Have you drank water?" And I don't mean anything by it, but it's like, I feel anxiety because of your discomfort. So I'm going to pop off with some advice. And that's more
mhm,
about me ameliorating my discomfort. And it isn't really witnessing where that person
mhm.
is without the power dynamic, which when we're readers, good readers are constantly aware of the power dynamic
Mhm.
and how much our words can influence people for years if we're not careful.
Well, also, you and I are Geminis. Geminis
Mm,
are word people. We're communication people.
mhm,
We love to communicate, and we're also pretty damn good listeners.
mhm,
I find most Geminis I know, they listen, they pay attention to your words. They are really into the words.
mhm,
And we know I'm a words of affirmation person too.
mhm.
Sometimes people mean well, but like you said, when it comes to something like grief, it's very uncomfortable. Our we do not deal with grief well in our
Mm,
culture.
mm,
And if
mm.
someone's grieving, what do? We want to get away from that because again, it's not fun. We want to be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, everything happens for a reason." My most hated
Wow.
statement ever. And by the way, I've also been guilty of saying that before I knew better because we
Mhm.
think, "Oh, we're offering words of comfort," but it's like, "No, you're not. You're trying to get away from this topic." It's a conversation ender.
Yeah. Wow, that's so good. Yeah, I think spiritual bypassing is
Mhm.
a nemesis of mine, because yeah, everything happens for a reason, or oh, I deserved this karmically, maybe in a past life, whatever. And it's just like, but suffering is still suffering. And that doesn't immediately, it doesn't make the suffering less. And what if it's not your fault somehow, but you don't know, you know?
Exactly. I mean,
Mhm.
one of the things I really, really hate, and this is with the manifestation crowd. Now, I've got mixed vibes on manifestation, but the ones who say, well, maybe you brought this on yourself through some negative thinking. Now, listen, that
Yeah.
is like some of the most harmful things you could ever say to someone who's going through something. I call that
Mhm.
spiritual shaming because
Mhm.
what you're doing is you are, if somebody is going through something and they're a victim of something, of course, we don't want someone to remain in the victim mindset. That's a different story. But to say, well, you brought it on through your negative thinking, it doesn't always work out like that. Sometimes you're minding your own business and something happens,
Mhm.
and it is the
Mhm.
way life goes. So those are
Mhm.
statements that are very neat and clean, but they're not neat and clean. They're actually down and dirty.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and there's an entitlement in that too, which is, "Oh, we're in a meritocracy, so if bad things happen to you, it's because of you." And I mean, we see that with the prosperity gospel stuff.
Mhm.
Like, "Oh, I didn't pray to God right, so I'm poor." Is that what you're saying? Or even some of the Abraham, Hicks stuff, which is like, "Oh, you've manifested this negative stuff," right? And I think that's really oversimplifying these more complicated metaphysical philosophies. But you're right. And I think the other thing I want to add about the cards you're dealt too is I really love the parts you have in here that are about like global grief or global
Yep.
fear, about all these things that are happening in the world that we have no control over, but are endemically like affecting us, and how do we find a way to hold space for that and then still be able to live our lives. This is a work of great compassion and empathy, Teresa. It really, really is. It's a beautiful book. Thank you.
Thank you. It's like I said, I'm just grateful that Wiser allowed me to write this book. And I say allow because, your publishers aren't always going to go along with the topics you want to talk about. But I really do think it's an important topic. And what's interesting is I'm seeing now other books coming out on the topic.
Mhm.
Courtney Weber wrote an incredibly beautiful book on grief from a witch's standpoint.
Oh gosh, I need to get a copy of that. Thank you for reminding me, actually.
Oh, it is so, so good. I highly recommend that. I forget the title. Of course, now I want to look it up
I'm
because
gonna have to
I
write it
don't want
down.
to, yeah, I don't want to like, shortchange her by not saying what the title is because she is also putting some again, it's not an easy topic to talk about. Our culture doesn't get into it. Sacred Tears, A Witch's Guide to Grief. I
Mm,
read that book and I read it after my book was already done and in the hopper. And I'm like, oh my God, we're talking about it. Yes, we're talking about
mhm,
it. And there are people
mhm,
out there who are doing amazing things on grief work. And I
mhm.
really appreciate the people who are doing that. Megan Devine is a huge inspiration for me. I
I was
love
just
her.
just talking about her with my client right before this, actually.
She's amazing. And Stephen Jenkinson is another person who really
Mhm,
deeply influences me.
mhm.
And, I love their work both. So it's happening out there, but why isn't it happening more in the tarot and astrology community? Because I don't
Yes.
know about you, but I've dealt with those topics again and again and again and again and again.
Mhm,
And what are we getting? We're getting books telling us to how to read for about love. I mean, that's great.
mhm,
That serves a point.
mhm,
But
mhm.
we do need to know how to read these topics. We need to learn how to do that.
Absolutely. I took Megan Devine's, Writing Your Grief course when I lost somebody
Mhm.
very close to me in 2018, and it was so helpful. Um, and you're right. I think people that are attracted to becoming often professional readers that read for others, a lot of us were parentified as
I was
kids.
parentified. Mhm.
I'm like, "Show me a woman with lots of animal rescues and people, and I'll show you a parentified person." But and I think there's that desire to be of service, and how, as a reader, when you don't have the answer that makes it all better, then there's this your own discomfort that comes that you cannot fix
Mhm.
this for this person. And I think that is like a number one skill, which is like sometimes if someone comes to our table, and we read for them and it's not the answer they want, or it's not an answer for various reasons, how do we be okay with that and allow
Mhm.
the space of that to exist as is? Because I'll get clients, and I know you did too. They're like, 5 other readers told me he's coming back. He still ain't here. What's the deal? Or whatever. I've heard some crazy stuff that has been said by other readers,
Mhm.
but obviously it wasn't resolved. So what is our role as a reader? Are we here to make it better? Are we here to
Mm.
like, and I want to jump real quick to the tarot journal, which is also out, that I've been doing all year so far. And I've noticed that there's a tendency where my tarot journaling just wants to be about the things that I'm worried about. And it
Mhm.
kind of amplifies the anxiety. And so I had to make conscious decisions to go, this tarot journal is not just about, well, is this going to happen? Or how should I do this? Or, which is all about that. Just always about, I need to have this clarified. I need to have this
Mhm.
understood,
Mhm.
and not so much using the tarot journal to explore these themes and meanings and the stories that we tell ourselves. So I think these two really go well together,
Mhm.
um, for someone who's doing the work. Like they can follow the cards you're dealt and then use the tarot journal to have a sacred place to put it, for sure.
Absolutely, and the one thing I will say that this is one of the reasons why I love journaling and I'm so big on it. It's a great way to learn tarot, but it's a great way to learn a lot about yourself.
Mm.
Because what you'll find is sometimes if you're writing or journaling, doing your tarot journaling, you start to discover when you really look at it, oh, I see what's going on here. I have anxiety. And if you
Mhm.
sit with that, that's so, so important because if you're asking the same question, for example, again and again, why are we doing that? And you notice you're doing it's like, oh, wait a minute. I asked this before and I've asked this in a different way.
Mhm.
I have some anxiety that I need to deal with. So one of the things that I found over the years when I've done my own journaling is sometimes I'm going in there doing predictions and seeing if I'm right. But
Mhm.
oftentimes I will start to notice little patterns of what's going on with
Mm.
me. And a lot of it has to do with my anxiety. I mean, I don't appear like an anxious person, but I am.
Mhm.
And I love then to meditate and sit with that and say, what is really going on here? Are you afraid you're not in control? What are you afraid of? And I got to say, last year was a year from hell. I have never
I
done so many
know.
tarot readings for myself last as I did last year. And a lot of it
Mhm.
was sorting stuff out, but there were times where I wanted to know what's going to happen here. And I realized when I caught myself doing that, I'm like, okay, you wanna micromanage the situation. Why?
Mhm.
Why? I had to do a lot of work around that.
Mhm.
Still working
Mhm.
through last year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I wanna plug my book for a minute because I got all the y'alls here, if you don't mind. But
Yes, I love your
it
book.
touches to what you're saying. So, was it last year? It was November, last year, the year before? But the book I have is Will You Give Me a Reading? So this is my bad boy, and so it has some of the themes that we're talking
Mhm.
about. I've got a whole chapter where I talk about, tarot is not an anxiety reduction device. And if you're
Yep,
just using that, you're really cutting short this beautiful landscape of how tarot can show up for you. And also, tarot is not analog Google. Just because you want to know to the nth molecular detail of what's to happen next doesn't mean that you're entitled to that answer from the universe. And
exactly. By the way, I love your book. Your book really gives people,
thank
and I'm
you.
gonna go back to this one thing. When it comes to reading tarot professionally, a lot of people take one of these 6-week certification courses, and then they assume they are ready to go out there and read for the public. And what happens is we have a bunch of readers who have not learned yet how to talk someone off the ledge, or what to
Yep.
do when your reading goes wrong, or what to
Mhm.
do when somebody bursts into tears in your reading, or what
Mhm.
about if they're talking about something that you find offensive. They don't know how to deal with that. So one of the things I really appreciate about your book is there's a lot of good advice in there
Mhm.
for delivering good readings.
Mhm.
Good readings. It's an excellent book. One of
Thank
the
you.
better ones for professional readers. And I feel if anybody takes a 6-week course in how to read and they want to go professional, read your book first
Mm.
and maybe get some training also in how to communicate with folks. So that way
Mhm.
you again get out there and don't cause harm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also though, even if you've done it all the right way, you've been so mindful about how you have shared something, people will immediately, rewrite that.
Yep.
And so techniques for towards the end of like, what did you hear from me? Just making sure that those very natural, um, cognitive, biases, that are often part of our defense mechanism, our ego that's trying to protect us, isn't engaging, and then we're walking away with not even actually the reading, but what we thought we heard of the reading, and how to communicate in a way where you're really checking that. Because, like you said, when most people come for readings professionally or your friends, there's some anxiety or fear that's often driving that. But anxiety and fear have this way of forcing you into black and white thinking
Yep.
that then can be amplified by reading if we're not careful in how we're communicating. And one of the techniques, if I'm giving a prediction or there's something in a reading, and there's a card people don't want, there's tower, there's whatever, I'll be like, I know you're going to hear this as a 10. This is not a 10. So on a scale from 1 to 10, we're looking at a level 5 in terms of volume, because anxiety, people tend to only hear 1 or 10 and not all the shades in between. So as
Mhm.
professionals, we can really communicate in a way that conveys the nuance of the reading without amplifying either fear or fake relief from that fear.
Yes. And also the other thing that's really important,
Mhm.
if you're really emotionally invested in the outcome,
Mhm.
you're going to hear what you want to hear. And that depends on your way of thinking. If you're an optimist, you're going to only see what you want to see. But if you're a negative Nelly, it doesn't matter if you get the sun. If you're emotionally invested, you're going to see something negative in there. So we have to always come to readings for ourselves with as much neutrality as possible. Listen, if you're trying to process an emotion, definitely tarot can help. But if you're trying to do divination, when you are bent out of shape about the outcome you want or don't want, guarantee you that's what you're going to see. Now, for tarot readers, the wonderful thing about us when we are reading for people, most of us tend to be pretty neutral.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it really great. We can be objective because we can simply look and say, well, this is what I see where things are headed, without really getting all those feelings involved. So
Mhm.
I would say if you're going to do divination, and if you find that you are really, again, hung up on what you want or don't want, get a
Mhm.
professional to do the reading for you.
Absolutely perfect advice. And I was just saying, Lisa Robertson is here with us in the
Hey, Lisa.
chat. Another wonderful tarot reader and author. Oh gosh. Um, so
She's
let's talk.
amazing.
Oh, she's amazing. Yeah, I agree. And there's been times as a pro reader where people have been in, and I have that chapter on that, which is like when to know that this is above your pay grade. Do not
Mhm.
attempt. They need probably to be taken to the ER room. There could be some psychological, this is not our pay grade. We're not therapists. Or people that are like, they are in such an emotional and fragile state that a reading may actually make things worse if we're not careful. And how do we know when that could be that moment and be brave enough to tell someone no?
Well, first of all,
Um,
sometimes you never know it.
right.
Sometimes you
That's
don't
true
know.
too. That's true too.
And that happens sometimes where you have somebody, they're in a really fragile thing, they're putting on a mask, and you do your best and they leave and maybe they make a terrible decision. You have
Mhm.
no control over that. But if you're getting kind of a feeling about a situation, then it is always best to stop and say, this is way out of the scope of my abilities and what I can offer you. And let me
Perfect.
refer you to who I think is going to be able to better help you. I've
Mm,
always kept a list of therapists handy because
same.
sometimes, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm a good listener. I've got a lot of
Mhm.
common sense, but I am not a psychotherapist. I do not have those skills. And when
Mhm.
I sense that somebody is dealing with a mental crisis that requires that, I am never going to try to take the place of that person because number one, that's unethical. Number two, it could lead to a lot of legal trouble for you. And we
Mhm.
certainly, again, never want to cause harm. We want
Yes.
people to get the right help. So readers
Mhm.
have to know that, hey, 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 don't play roles that you're not meant to play.
Mhm.
Steer people in the right direction. Know your role.
Absolutely everything, I agree, and I wanna add to that too, that if there's no answer, that's
Mhm.
the answer,
Yep.
and we have to be really careful. Like, I'm really careful about where is this information coming from? Is it a psychic hit? Is it my bias?
Mhm.
Is it my desire to make this okay for this person? Am I be getting triggered? And it takes a lot of perception and self awareness because I've seen readers who are just like, whatever comes out of my mouth is just from the universe. And I'm like, no, it ain't. Girl, that's your bias right there,
Yep.
and that we have to be honest with ourselves about the voice. So I'm always watching for when my bias, oh, this is my bias. I'm getting
Mhm.
overexcited. I'm no longer in a place of neutrality that
Mhm.
I'm like, I'm getting kind of emotional. And that could be wanting just to help them so bad. Um,
Mhm.
also, to the other point, which is if I'm not getting the information that they want, I'm very careful not to speculate and to tell
Mhm.
them that, which is this is as much information as I can give you. Um, if I go into further detail, then that turns to speculation, which is
Mhm.
not the same as the reading. And I need to make this clear that now we're going somewhere else. And I need your consent about that. Or I don't know if my speculation is helpful. Let's just leave it as it is.
Yeah. The other thing that I find
Mhm.
over the years, it's kind of like my own little mental trick. If I find that somebody's sitting across from me and I've an attitude or an opinion about what their question is, let's say they have like a lifestyle that I'm kind of like, whoa, I always would say, okay, before we touch these cards, this is my opinion. I want to get that out of the way. It's like when I say it out loud and I get it out of the way, now
Mhm.
I can go to the cards and be completely objective. It's the
Mhm.
same like if it's a situation. Let's pretend
Mhm.
you're in front of me, you had a terrible situation with a friend, and I just went through that. And it was identical. Here's the thing again, to make sure that the reading is clean, it's I find the best thing is I'll say, Jenna, I went through that exact same thing. This is how it turned out. Just
Mhm.
telling you that for reference. Let me get that out of the way. Now let's
Mhm.
get to the cards. This
Mhm.
is just a weird thing for myself. It's like I speak it and now, boom, it's out of my consciousness.
Yep.
It really works wonders. And also having the courage to admit when you are feeling triggered or you're uncomfortable with the topic as a reader, or when you don't have the skills for that thing, or this is
Mhm.
all the information that I'm getting, and just saying it
Mhm.
is really wise, and that's being a good ethical reader. And by the
Mhm.
way, when you said about people just saying, whatever, I'm just going to tell you whatever. When I first started out as a reader and I was very young and very wet behind the ears, I thought it was great to have no filter. But I didn't realize that sometimes that would cause harm. People would think, "Oh my God, this is the meanest reader." I was like, "No, I'm not mean. I'm just straightforward." And so I realized that you can be straightforward, and I'm always going to be a straightforward reader, but you can deliver the information with tact and kindness and
Mhm.
gentleness.
Yeah.
And you can still be really honest and straightforward.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I agree. That's not always easy because sometimes even that may not be heard because it's
Mhm.
you're telling me something I don't like, therefore it's you're bad and it's all bad, right? And that's when someone is in a high anxiety state. So sometimes even when we're doing our best, we have to be okay if it's not being perceived like that because as readers, we're the messengers, and guess what people do to messengers? They can shoot them sometimes, right? So we also, even if we know that we've done our best, we got to be okay and find a way to ground
Mhm.
the energy of their response and not
Mhm.
take it personally and find a way to put it on the shelf when you go. That's so important. And I think this piece
Mhm.
and boundaries are probably the biggest reasons why many full-time readers don't stay long because without those good tools, you can get so burnt out and overwhelmed energetically
Yes.
and emotionally. Yeah.
And I love that you bring these parts up too, not taking it personally. For example, if someone hates your work, and I know that you're very sensitive, and I'm sensitive too. So it sucks when somebody thinks, "Ah, what an awful reading," or "Oh, I don't like this person's book," or "I don't like that
One
outfit they're
star.
wearing."
It's like
Yeah, 1 star. It really sucks when people come at you like that. It's always shocking to
yeah.
me when they do that. But then, I've gotten better, maybe my old age, at saying, okay, well, I don't hit for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You got to let that stuff go because I'm not for everybody. It's just like
Yep.
there are many readers and astrologers that I've worked with, and there are some that I really love. I love Sam Reynolds to the end of time. I get a reading with Sam Reynolds every single year. I just bought my birthday reading.
Oh.
He's really the right reader for me.
Mhm.
For me, I want to make sure I say that very clearly. For me, because he communicates in a way that works for me. And
Mhm.
I've learned I'm not for everybody, and that's okay. Maybe
Mhm.
that person is meant to go to you. Maybe it's meant to go to Lisa Robertson, excuse me. Maybe the person is meant to just do their own readings. That's okay. And also letting go of the work at the end of the day
Yeah.
is so important because there are some readings that do haunt you, that
Mhm.
that really affect you on a deep, deep level. And I gotta tell you, I've had some that even to this day, I still think about those people and those readings,
Mhm.
and they were hard, hard, hard readings, and always hope
Mhm.
they're doing okay.
Yeah. Like, I wanna add to that, like, there have been times where I've pulled my punch where I've seen a worse something happening, and because maybe I cared about that person or I was afraid of how they would respond, I did not I was not a faithful messenger of the cards.
Mhm.
And I have guilt to this day because the cards became true and they
Mhm.
weren't prepared.
Mhm.
And so that was something I had to work through, was being able to deliver sometimes tough information, um, and really try to step out of my own way and my own ego as much as possible. And really just I'm a conduit, but it's hard. And it's interesting because, I see people in person. I have an office. I see people on Zoom. I see people on phone. And everyone thinks that in person is the best way. But when people ask me what is the best, most accurate, I'm like, well, they're all accurate. I wouldn't offer them if they weren't. But which one out of all three of them is the easiest for me is the phone,
Yep.
because I'm not looking at your face. I'm not having to have any kind of opinion about you or your responses, and I can just flow and flow and flow. And it's funny because that's the least popular option.
Yep.
Isn't that
You
crazy?
No, back when I used to read for the public, I'm like Lisa, I see you, Lisa. I don't read for the public anymore. I stopped in 2020. I was
Yep,
done.
I
I want to
remember.
focus on my writing career.
Mhm.
And that's writing and teaching is really what I love to do. And I'm getting ready to retire in just a couple of years anyway. So
Yep.
I'm in the very last legs of my working life. So folks, if you want to study with me, you better get on it because it's coming to an end. It is coming to an end. But when I used to, read for the public. I don't know where the hell I was going with this now. Oh,
Mm.
how do I want to phrase it? Look at me, and now I got all distracted. That's my Gemini brain. But
We're like 6
yeah,
people right now talking.
we are. But
Like, come on.
I used to read for people in person, and I did that for a long time. And then I switched over to the phone. And it became convenient. First of all, I had a lot of clients out of state. I had a lot of elderly clients that couldn't get up my stairs. That's what started me
Mhm.
reading on the
Oh,
phone.
really? Oh, wow.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
the first phone reading I ever did was one of my elderly ladies called, and she said, "Listen, I broke my hip. There's no way I'm gonna get up those stairs. Can you do
Oh.
a phone? Can you just do this over the phone?" And, I said, okay." So I did it over the phone. It worked great. So all of her friends, her senior citizen friends then started doing phone readings.
Mm,
That's how I started doing phone readings. It was actually for my clients who were disabled or
mhm,
elderly and couldn't get up. I've got a lot of stairs here. And so that's how I started. And I found that for me, like you, I preferred phone readings because had nothing that broke my concentration. I could
mhm,
just look at the cards. I had nobody like making weird faces or anything like that, or twisting the ring, or playing games with me. I
mm,
could concentrate, and also because I had nothing to look at, my intuition got to flourish. It could come alive and do the work, and I loved it.
mm,
But I would have some people who got real salty when I switched to phone. And I
mhm,
remember like one woman, contacted me and I said, I only do it phone now. And she goes, "Well, I want the personal touch. Thanks, but no thanks." Really rude. People got so awful with me when I switched to
mhm,
phone.
mhm.
And, another one of the reasons why it's like, I don't need this. I don't need this crap.
Yeah.
I don't like Zoom readings because, first of all, I don't have a big table for doing it. And I like to lay the cards out. So
Mhm,
Zoom for me is very distracting. And
mhm,
sometimes the computer doesn't work. And I hate that. The
mhm,
phone, I can relax. I don't have anything to distract me. My intuition works so much better.
mhm,
And also, when COVID came around, and this was really what got me also like, oh my
mhm,
God. I
mhm.
had people trying to like force their way back in the office. And I'm like, no,
I remember you
no,
talking about this.
no, you're
Mhm.
not getting in the office. Nobody gets in here. And I was really shocked. Now I live with someone who's really severely immune compromised.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that also became very shocking for me, I would still see a few like longtime clients in person, but I had to tell them you can't come in here. It's COVID. I live with someone who's really ill. And they got
Mhm,
mad and really crappy with me. And I'm like,
mm.
you've got to be kidding me. You do not have compassion for my situation. I don't
Yeah.
feel like being in danger. In fact, COVID
Mhm,
not only helped me make decisions around that, but COVID killed my yoga studio.
mhm,
Killed it.
mhm.
It's not safe to teach yoga.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Not
I
when you
think
live with
you
someone who's sick.
I think this is like a great, like, other point you're making around it's okay to fire clients.
Mhm,
And I've started doing that more and more. I used to not, because I would be like, I don't want them to be mad, or I don't want to deal with that. And more, I'm like, if I'm being disrespected,
mhm.
if I have someone just trying to treat me like I'm Zoltan or Zoltar or whatever, like, tell me my fortune next, next, next. I'm done. I
Yep,
just don't. It's not in alignment with the way I want to show up, and
exactly.
it's okay. And people will be upset. I mean, I've had people definitely give me bad reviews just because they were mad. I said no, and that is a risk. But if we don't do that, we then compromise ourselves, and that
Yep,
also leads to burnout. Oh my
yep.
gosh. We're supposed to be talking about tarot journaling. This is a
See,
whole
this is the problem. You get us together and we can talk about so many things. But, I will say, I read tarot for the public for 30 years. 30 years. That's a long time.
that is
That
a
is a
long
long
time.
time to be in the trenches. And the
Mhm,
bound I mean, I've got so many stories about really rude, entitled people that when I start telling people the stories, they think I'm faking. I'm like, no, that's what they do.
mhm,
And, I will say one thing, it's made me a better customer because one
mm,
thing I know, if I get a reading, I'm going to
mhm,
treat that reader with respect, even if I don't like what they're saying. I'm
mm,
always going to leave a tip. I'm
mhm,
only going to leave kind reviews. If I don't have a good review, if I didn't have a good experience, I don't leave a review. I'm not
mhm,
that person. If I go into any business, a
mhm,
restaurant, I'm going to be the best person you serve that night. When I walk in my bank, they know I'm going to treat everybody there with respect. When I have my cleaning people come, I'm always
mhm.
going to pay them more than what they ask. I've learned to be an incredibly good customer because of how I got treated for the 30 years I used to read for the public.
Yup. Yes, indeed. It's funny, I no longer do well, I would be happy to do events-based readings, but most events don't wanna pay me my rates, for event work, so I'm like, "Alright, if you pay me this much, I'll come." But what I noticed was the people that were the most respectful, that were like, "Nope, oh, your time is up, let's go," or, "Do you want some food?" or, "Can I get you something to drink?" or and always tip me, were always blue collar service workers.
Hmm.
It was always those people that treated me the best, and it was, by and large, the very wealthy who treated me the worst.
I've had mixed bags from both.
Oh, you have.
Yeah,
Ugh,
I've
I've
had
had
mixed bags from both because I've had a lot of folks, blue collar, that were deal seekers. And
oh, mhm.
oh
Yeah,
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 that
yeah.
what I've had a lot of that. I've had a lot of folks, trying to like get a freebie reading and all that. I've had wealthy clients that treated me like you're the hired help. But I've
Mm,
also had wealthy clients who've been just incredible good friends and they've been
mhm,
lovely and they've been amazing. I've had a mixed bag. And so I
mm.
found it really doesn't seem to like
Yeah,
for me at least, it doesn't seem to like matter where what someone's income level is or anything. People are people, and sometimes
mm,
somebody's just got an attitude, and I'm the convenient person to
right.
take it out on.
Well, I will say it's a mixed bag with individual clients, but it's
Yes.
the gigs where it's a little different, and it's probably because the wealthier people have never maybe had a job where it's a fee for service.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's the difference, but yeah, when it comes to individuals,
Yeah.
it's more of a mixed bag, and you're right about that. Yeah. So journaling, do we we could keep talking about this. I want to talk about your wonderful journal and all the
I've got
stickers.
stickers.
Look at you can
Stickers.
see I've been using them. I've got little holes here already.
I love stickers. Everybody who knows me knows I love stickers. I use stickers for my planner. And when Wiser approached me and they said, "We're thinking about putting stickers in there," I'm like, "That's my fantasy. Please do it." And I loved working on this project. Number one, because again, I am a journaler. And number two, the fact
Ooh,
that it has
ooh.
stickers in there. And also what I love when Wiser created this is
Mm,
a purple. The
yeah.
size of this fits right into a backpack, so you can carry it on the go. I love the ribbon. I love all the
Mhm,
spaces.
mhm.
There's just
And it opens more flat. That is one
yep,
of my pet peeves sometimes with journals is, like, you have to, like, arm wrestle it open in order to
yes,
write, and this opens flat, but it's, like, hard cover, so it's gonna take a beating through the years you're using it and still
it
hold
will. The
up.
other thing what
Mhm,
I really like what Wiser did with this, they put in so many things. They put in where you can write the date, the
mhm,
moon phase, which I
yep,
love because I'm all
mhm,
about the moon. Also keywords, interpretation, your first impressions, and my absolute favorite part is reflections because
yep,
I always like to come back and see like um what did I glean out of this, or if I'm doing a prediction,
mhm,
was it accurate? Like I did this one spread because I was all bent out of shape about a situation. So I thought, I want to see how this is going to resolve. And I got my reading and I thought, well,
uh-huh,
we'll see. And then, of course, when I came back later and looked at it a couple months later, like 3 months later, I was like, wow, those cards were really right on. So that reflection part is my absolute favorite thing. And I think
mhm,
if you're trying to learn how to read, or if you're trying to do divination readings, or
mhm,
even if you are working out an emotional thing, to be able to come back later and say, I now feel very differently about this situation, or
mm.
I'm still dealing with this. That's so helpful in your process work. So helpful.
Agreed, agreed, and I also brought out because I also got this, which is a tarot card
Yes.
sticker book, so if you run out, and I
Mhm.
will, I've got all of these little bad babies, and, also, I'll look back on some readings and I'm like, I effing projected the shit out,
Yes.
like, and just, like, made this how did I see this BS in these cards at that time,
Mhm.
How did I fool myself, And that's so helpful. That's so
Yes.
helpful to have that insight.
When
Mhm.
you get that insight, or when you get it really wrong,
Mhm.
that's actually going to make you a better reader, because nobody wants to be wrong. But listen, if you're going to read tarot, you're going to be wrong. You're going to be wrong with divination. You're going to be wrong with what you're feeling about a situation. You're going to be wrong. And the
Mhm.
beauty is with this reflection thing, let's say you do a divination, now you can see where you went wrong. Then you can be
Mhm.
like, that's why I interpreted it that way. It should have been this. Got
Yep.
it. The cards never lie, but our own human mind will take us in all kinds of stupid directions. And that's how you become, again, a good reader, by making those mistakes and learning from them.
Mhm.
You're going to grow. And that's why the reflection part is my favorite. But also, like you said, with the projection part, you can go back later and say, of
Well, how did
course.
I also wanna mention that it starts off like you can follow there's a template there, you can follow it. I kinda don't because I'm a rebel without
Of
I'm a
course
rebel
you
without a
are.
clue. But it starts off with 1 card, then it goes to 2 cards, so it's very sequential. So it's really if you're a student, this is very nice to have because it builds on itself, and allows you to build relationships with all of these different spreads. So it goes like 1 card,
Mhm,
2, 3, 4 Celtic cross, and then the Ankh spread, the
mhm.
horseshoe. Horseshoe is the second. I learned horseshoe runs like right after the Celtic cross. So it's funny that that's in there. Like I have old feelings about the horseshoe spread. The astrological wheel spread, that's so exciting.
Mhm,
Your personal spreads that
mhm.
you can create, and then keywords and then stickers.
Yep,
But I
and
wanna
look,
talk about oh, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say also for folks who don't have the journal, the keywords are in full color.
Yeah, yeah.
So Wiser
Mhm,
did
mhm.
not skimp on this. The designer is
They
Catherine
didn't.
Sky Peck, and Catherine is just an amazing and brilliant artist. So I loved collaborating with her. So the fact that they put full color in, I mean, I'm like, now this is the kind of journal I've been waiting for.
Yeah.
Finally, one that meets my standards and that I
Mhm,
actually use. I mean, I have a lot of different journals. I've got tons all over the house, and
mhm,
different tarot journals that I've worked with and started.
mhm.
But this is exactly the kind that I love because it's pretty, it's functional, it's made to last, like you said.
It is, and Wiser, like, my book is through Llewellyn, but I got to know some of the Wiser folk when I went to the, Cover Awards
Yes.
in Colorado, and just Wiser people are super cool, like, I really enjoyed getting to know them. Very, very thoughtful about, what they want to put into the world. Very, very, just very, very cool vibe of people. Llewellyn shut down the bar, and I was one of those. It's just so funny. I'll tell you about that. Maybe not here. I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's in color. It's beautiful, and like I said, like me, I'm probably not going to do too many one cards. I'm gonna do my own thing, and you can do that too. It's just
Mhm.
prompts. But I did want to talk about, I actually came up with a journaling technique for tarot that I
Ooh.
kind of wanted to share today, if that was okay.
Yes, I'm all ears. You know I love anything about, journaling, so any technique, I'm all ears. Whoops, I don't wanna spill this little tea
So
here.
this, I felt like this was something that for maybe newer or lower intermediate tarot students, especially around cards that you struggle with. And it's an acronym I created called SOLVE. I'll put it in
Ooh.
the chat. SOLVE, solve. So S is where did I put it? I put it in here. Let me see here. Let me make sure I'm saying it correctly. So solve. S stands for kind of the what is the what did I put here? What's the story? What's maybe the meaning of the card? What are some of the keywords? But what's the story that you kind of just know on the fly? And then O is origin story, which is do a little homework, research what that card has meant over the hundreds of years and how it might have shifted and changed. Then L is for life lesson. How have you seen this card show up? What lesson did this card show you in your life? What is a personal life story from your
Mhm.
past? And then V, what are the values? What are the values that the card is conveying on kind of like in a systemic way? And then finally, embodiment. How do you embodied the values and the stories and lessons of this card for yourself? And just doing that as a journal for each card really helps, number one, to deepen our understanding of the card
Yep.
beyond just keywords, which are important, but it's about telling a story and seeing how that card is represented in our lives in very visceral ways. Because if we're going to read tarot for ourselves or others, it's so important to be like, what's the story? There's a story that we're seeing here. Once you find the
Mhm.
story, you're golden. 'Cause that's what we do.
Yes. That's what we
So
are. We are telling stories, and tarot is our picture book. So,
so
and
like
by the way, when you mentioned about you love the title for my latest book, I just want
mhm.
to make sure I always give credit where credit is due. My son came up with that. My son is very clever.
Oh, he did.
And yes, and I was like, God, I got to get a good title for this. He goes, How about the cards you're dealt? I'm like, Oh my God. And then the second part, How to Deal When Life Gets Real, I came up with that. So
Like it
we had to like tag team each other on that.
Yes, that's awesome. Let me put this down. So I'm gonna put down like this: solve stories, meaning, origin story,
Yes,
life lesson, values, and embodiment.
that's brilliant.
Thanks. Really kind of looking at it, looking at each card a little more deeply and seeing that we are all living tarot. Tarot is us, and we're tarot, and it's not this strange other. And when we can find our own stories, and I think that's something a tricky intuition trick. If someone sits down and immediately there's something from your own life and your own past that you're recalling, sometimes that's not bias. Sometimes that's your psychic ability going, this is like this. Pay attention. You
Mhm.
know what this is. So when we tell these stories, I think it has a way of kind of keying that aspect. So that's just one of the things I've been playing with lately with your tarot journal and the tarot.
Thank you. And I agree. Sometimes, we've been there before, maybe not in our physical bodies, but on
Mm,
some other level. And so
mhm,
there's that like that knowing that comes, that gentle knowing that's
mm.
different than bias.
100%, 100%, 100%.
Mhm.
I agree completely. This is why, like, I know a lot of people, and okay, this is going to be my hot take. I know a lot of people do a lot of email readings, but I find sometimes that keeps people from really getting the intuition because the writing out part is often a very logical, like, intellectual thing, whereas sometimes those psychic hits just pop, pop, pop. And if we're kind of more with someone in live time, we can't overthink it. And
Yep.
it kind of forces that, like, on the fly, in those intuitive hits that sometimes show up. I don't know if
Well,
you
when I used
agree.
to do email readings, I always did them as a stream of consciousness.
Good. Yeah.
My brain and fingers work really fast together. And
Hmm.
so I would just like let it fly, and then I would go back and I would read it. And sometimes I would be kind of astounded at what I
Mm.
tapped out. So
Hmm.
I did that like almost like automatic writing,
Yeah,
automatic
like the
typing.
channeling. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
And it's really interesting. Uh, Tarot readings by email can work very well because, energy is energy, and you've got that energy, and you could feel what someone's going through by what they send you in that
Mm,
question if
mm,
you know how to tap into it. However, email readings are very hard.
mhm.
They're very hard because oftentimes you get the people then who want to make sure they got their money's worth. So they're going to try to get more and more information from you. I had to stop doing them. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I just spent an
Yeah.
hour on your reading and now you think you need more? Mm-mm.
Yeah,
No.
I agree that if it's a channeled kind of writing where you're like stream of consciousness going through, that can be helpful, but not that I'm gonna sit on this and think about this a lot, a lot, a
Yeah.
lot, and then because then that takes it into that
Yep.
speculative space. But you're right, like an hour's worth of writing doesn't the value of that isn't often conveyed to the consumer in the same way an hour of live time does,
Yep.
even if the information is similar. For
Yep.
sure, for sure.
Absolutely. They just don't understand it. It looks like, oh, there's a couple words that probably took you 10 minutes. It's like, actually, it took me an hour
Mhm.
because I have arthritis. You know?
Right? You're like, "My carpal's out of yeah. Oh, another idea I wanted to talk about journaling. So,
Yeah.
you could with the tarot journal, if it's something that resonates, you can post a date ahead and do a reading for future you. So
Ooh.
you could count the pages out to like October, September, do a reading for that date and leave it, let it go and ignore it. And then eventually you're going to get there and get that reading. So that's another fun technique I was thinking about doing too.
That's brilliant, and I have another technique that's one of my
Yeah,
favorites.
I'm
So what
here. I'm
you
ready.
do, you ask a question,
Hmm.
you shuffle the cards, and you can pick whatever spread you want, 1 card, 3 card, whatever. And then
Hmm.
you pull your cards, but you don't turn them over. You just simply write whatever you feel, and then leave it alone and come back to it at the end of the day, turn the cards over. What cards did you get? How did that line up with what you wrote? Were you projecting? Were you feeling? Were you intuiting? It is such a good technique for developing your intuition. It is one
Yeah.
of my I call this don't peek. So, it's something that I used to do also with my tarot students. I'd say, okay, we're going to do a reading now. Pick the card. Do not look at it. Do not look at it. Just write what you feel or say what you feel. Another technique I love is billets. Billets is one of my absolute, incredibly favorite techniques. I wrote about this in Tarot No Questions Asked. So, what you do with billets is you write a bunch of questions on slips of paper, fold
Hmm.
them up, put them in a bag, shake that bag up, pull a billet. Don't open it. Shuffle your cards, pull a card, write what you think the meaning is, and then open your billet.
I
It
love that.
develops your intuition brilliantly.
Mm.
And when I've done this live in class, it's always been so interesting watching what happens. I had one student, one time I was at a big group, and anyhow, I said, okay, well, I'm going to just pick this person here. Everybody wrote their things. We put them in the bag. And so this person, I said, okay, you're going to pull a billet. Now pull your card. So he pulled the billet. He was holding it and he pulled the card 10 of wands. He goes, well, I see all this hard work in this card. And like somebody's going to have to bust their ass to get the outcome. And then when he opened the billet, it was the billet he put in the bag. We were all like tripping out. And I'm like, that's the amazing thing about billets. But
Mm.
it's really, really helpful for um, do the don't peek thing or do the billet things with your journal. It's going to blow your mind. It's really fun. And it also helps you to develop your intuition.
I love that. Lisa says this is the tarot version of the marshmallow experiment. I was like, yeah, I know. I don't know if I can hold. Oh, I'm so curious. This is such a great idea. I do something kind of similar with morphic. I call them morphic readings, but it's kind of a mix between family systems and morphic fields, but
Ooh,
part of it, and it's a 3D spread that moves in real time. But one of the things is you hold the card and you speak from the card, but you don't look at the card to the very end.
yes.
Just like that. It's crazy. People are so nervous that, and it's like, look, it works. Sometimes we overthink it. Like it actually is
Yes.
way more simple than sometimes we think it is if we can just let go of the fear of being wrong or judged.
Yep. Absolutely.
Um,
The other thing I would recommend
mm,
too with tarot, you can use it for dream journaling.
oh
So here's
yes.
how this works. You have a dream, make sure your tarot deck is nearby, shuffle it up, lay out the cards. What is the meaning of this dream? And then free write about what those cards mean. I just had a very weird dream where I was, I think, with my husband, and we were on this big tour bus, like the kind that are really tall, and there's
Mhm.
that upper deck where you could stand out there. And
Mhm.
we were driving through New York like it was in the 50s. And then we were driving through it like it was in the 70s when it was really dangerous. And I woke up and I had to laugh because my husband hates New York and I banned him from New York. So I'm like, I don't know what this means, but it was such a
Mhm.
weird dream. And I pulled some cards on it, wrote about it. I'm not going to share that here, what
Mhm.
the cards said because it's personal. But
Mhm.
I was like, okay, hmm,
That's
let me think
so
about this.
fascinating. I know I'm from a dream interpretation, I'm just really fascinated. So you were both at the top with the open air above you?
Yeah. And we were going through parts of New York in the 50s when there were different districts, like the meatpacking district, which was very different than it was in the 70s and 80s. That's when it got real nice and seedy, which is when I was there in the 80s. And then all of a sudden we're going through where everything got really, really terrible and torn down. And it was super fascinating. And we just had this big view.
I'm curious, I'm guessing you've probably had your astrocartography done or you've done it, and I'm wondering if New York shows up in that for you because no? No,
No,
wow.
according to me, well, when I'm in New York, I'm more like myself than anywhere else in the world.
I
New York is
know.
really my playground. And in fact, a lot of my friends who are New Yorkers are like, I can't tell that you're not a New Yorker. You like belong in the city. You are a New Yorker. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I've lived here for a little while, but I'm not a New Yorker.
Mhm.
And according to astrocartography, the
Mm.
only place in the United States that works for me is like Montana, Oklahoma, and Texas, which the tarot lady ain't never going there. And apparently, the best place in the world for me to be is like in Iraq and like Syria and, like these places also that I'm like, I don't go anywhere hot. And I don't want to go to places where there's a lot of stuff going on right now
Yeah, yeah,
either.
yeah.
I think, yeah, I think that the United States is pretty much like I shouldn't even be here unless I'm in the Southwest, which ain't never
Not
happening.
gonna happen. Yeah,
No,
I
I'm like
remember
yeah, New York red heart.
we went to some really great dim sum when we were in New York for Reader Studio, and yeah, I had such a good time with you. It was
I
like
love New York.
watching you. Yeah, I mean, I never lived in New York, but I was in Philly for years and it's similar a lot, and I was like, "You seem like a local." I would have said that too. I would have said that. Um, let's see here. Some other ideas for tarot journaling. So it's not just like an anxiety of like, is this going to
Yeah.
happen? Or I'm worried about that. There was something I just started that I got from Tim Ferriss. You know that guy, the 4 Hour Work Week
Yeah,
dude, and
that guy.
blah blah blah. But he does something in journaling called fear setting, and I thought
Ooh.
that was really interesting. So, and I thought, oh, you could modify this with tarot. So fear setting is about something that you have a fear about, like, oh, I don't know if I want to read for other people, right? I'm afraid. So there's 3 steps in it. First, you define the fear, you imagine it. But I also think you could probably pull a card, like what is the card saying about my fear as it is? And then prevent. What
Mhm.
can you do to possibly prevent the fear as it's showing up? You can pull a card. And then there's a third step, which is repair. If this scenario happens, what would be a card that could actually fix this and make this better? Where do I have any kind of will to manage the fear that's showing up? And I thought that was a really cool idea. And I was playing with it with a couple of things. And it reminds me of a spread that was in my book, which is how do we use tarot in a very active way to like sometimes manage our anxiety rather than just make it go away, but
Mhm.
but the solution for the inner work. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Mhm.
Those of you who are here, you guys can Google it for your setting and see if what that would look like if you approach it with the tarot pull for that. And that could be as simple as like a 3-card spread.
Mhm.
Oh, and then also in my final, like I have more, but the final one I want to share is like bitch fest. Just like bitch fest. Bitch fest in your journal, like bitch it out, like complain and use the tarot to bitch it out, complain about it. You don't always have to be high-minded, oh, I'm a spirit having a human experience. Well, sometimes I'm just a bitch having a bitchy experience and I need to get it out and into the journal so I can move on. So those are some of my ideas. Do you have any more or anything else you want to share around journaling?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I tried this no complaint world where I was supposed to be like try not to complain for 30 days. I was doing pretty good. But what I realized is that everybody around me complains all the time. So suddenly I had nothing to talk about with these people. I'm like, holy
Mm.
cats, I have a bunch of complainers around me. So just really a really weird thing. That was a long time ago, by the way. I still have a lot of complainers around me. One other thing I would also say about journaling, you
Mhm.
don't have to just write.
Yeah.
You can actually, so for example, I've got this weird little journal I've been working on. I'm not going to show you the inside of it because nobody needs to know. But
Oh,
anyhow, the journal is with drawings. So
yeah.
it's like all drawings. And, I'm going to have to probably burn this thing because I just realized I wrote something mean about my husband in here.
Mhm.
I was mad at him one day. So, shh. But hey, we get mad at our partners. And so
Yeah.
what do? I journal, but here I'm drawing some cartoons. And if he saw that, he'd probably laugh and then he'd say, "What the hell?" But anyhow, so
Yeah.
this is like a little journal that I've been
Mhm.
doing where I just draw. It's little cartoon journals. I have a
Mhm.
sketch journal that I do too. So sometimes you can do sketches. You
Mhm.
don't have to just write words. Or here's another technique that's great fun that I've used in other journals: cut and paste, cut
Mhm.
out images, create collages. These
Mhm.
are ways, again, to get really super creative. And you can do that with tarot. Maybe you pull the hermit and maybe you pull out your magazines, cut out images that make you think of the hermit, cut out statements, paste that in there. That's going to help you to connect with the cards. That's a creative way of also working with your journal. So journaling doesn't have to be just writing,
Mhm.
collage work, drawing pictures,
Mhm.
drawing cartoons, sketches. You can even choose to write instead of like, oh, I'm going to write out what the card means. Maybe write out the meanings as a haiku.
Mhm.
Maybe write them out as a rap song. So get creative with your journaling. Don't feel that it's just got to be me writing, this is what the card means, my prediction. No, play with it. Get yourself into a different
Yeah.
headspace. You would be amazed at what comes out of you when you do that.
I just came up with okay, 2 things. Like, 1, I saw 2 years ago, an art therapist for art therapy, and I
Ooh.
started art journaling. And I was like, "Why didn't this occur to me before now?" As a tarot reader, of course, imagery is going to be very big for me and art is. And I noticed how there were these themes that I didn't know until I looked at my art over time. I was like, "Why is everyone drowning?" No, or something like that. But the idea I just thought of was, you remember when we had I'm gonna have to write it down so I don't forget. Remember, like, those fridge poetry, fridge magnets that were,
Yes.
like, all
I've
the
got
rage?
some right here.
What if and hear me out. What if we, took keywords and cut the keywords of various cards
Mhm.
and then created poetry, different kind of poetry using the cutout keywords and then glued them in.
Brilliant.
I'm gonna
Brilliant.
do that
I
tomorrow.
I also think there needs to be a whole set of tarot magnets to put on the fridge to do your
Mhm.
little readings and put it up there, and then you've got it like a little touchstone when you go to the fridge. It's like, oh yeah, I pulled that devil card today. Maybe I shouldn't
Yeah,
be. Maybe I shouldn't be going in this fridge and having that extra slice of devil foods cake.
it's like devil, 10 of swords. All right, I'm shutting the the fridge again. Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is so much fun. It would be fun just to have like a tarot journaling workshop or class where you meet and play
Mhm.
around. I was also thinking bullet journaling a little bit,
Yep,
and gratitude journaling, and then
I
also
do
like
all of that.
inspirational quotes I read from books. I'll write it down and then use it. Oh, actually, from in the journal. I'm going to share this. This is so I did that recently. So I asked from a book I was reading. It's called The Age of Overwhelm.
Mhm,
Really, really great book. You know, just because with all the social media and stuff, we're all getting
mhm,
verklempt. So I asked this question I took from that book, and I'd seen a bunch of clients that day and I was feeling really tired, and I said, "How did my work matter today?"
mm,
And I pulled 3 cards and I got 10 of cups, the hermit, and ace of cups. And one of the sessions was really about helping someone who is isolated be connected more. And that was so good for me to connect to the meaning of why I do this work. So I offer
mhm,
that to everybody else. How did my work matter today? And pull 3
mhm,
cards.
mhm. My friend Sarah Selecki shared um, a little reflection, and I don't remember anymore where she got it from because she credited somebody, and I'm crediting her, and she's crediting someone else.
It's
Um, what was the most life affirming decision, a choice of this day, or what was my most life
mm,
affirming moment of this day? And I love using that at the end of the day for journaling. It's
mhm.
really, really good for that. What was the most life affirming moment of my day?
That's really beautiful.
Love that. She's an
Yeah.
incredible writer, and I just think that is a great thing to be asking ourselves.
Mm.
Stephen and Jennifer says they love my suggestion to find song lyrics. That's a great way to connect with your cards. It's also a great way to connect with your astrology, by the way. Create a soundtrack for your astrology chart. Create a soundtrack for the tarot cards. I did this one thing because I'm weird. One day I was thinking about the Rolling Stones and how many songs they have. I actually put a Rolling Stones tarot playlist, 78 cards, on my website. I went through every Rolling Stones song to find cards that would work with each song. And I had so much fun doing it. And it also really helped me to connect, number one, with the Stones, who I love, but also with the tarot in a really fun and playful way.
That is such a good idea. I'm on Spotify. Now you're giving me ideas. Like I can create tarot-based playlists, right? Like,
Yes, do it. And create your own astrology chart soundtrack. You need to do that. It's really
yeah.
fun.
Oh, speaking of, I wanted to ask you about Pluto moving into Aquarius, right? And what your face, I know, like help. I'm not like I'm a dabbler, but I would love to hear from you. What are we in for? What do we need to be kind of aware of?
Well, first of all, I am going to be doing a little special free presentation on Instagram tonight at 6 o'clock Central
Oh,
Time.
uh-huh.
And I'm going to be talking about Pluto and Aquarius. And I'm also pulling cards for every sign of the zodiac. It's going to be your Pluto and Aquarius tarot reading. So, folks, please join me. It's going to be fun. Pluto stays in a sign for a very, very long time. It's one of the outer planets.
Mm-hmm.
And so it could be in a sign for a decade or longer. It just depends. And Pluto is the sign of transformation. Pluto loves to come in, look at a situation, look around and say, I'm going to tear this down and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
make it better. Now, making it better, of course, is in the eye of the beholder. So Pluto will come around and it's going to rip things down and it is going to force you to go deep and go dark and excavate all kinds of stuff. And then you've got to think about what am I building from this?
Mm.
So when it comes to us as, the collective, Pluto going into Aquarius, it went into Aquarius for a brief moment last year. So last year, I'm going to give you an example. When it went into Aquarius, everything blew up in my family. Everything blew up. We had this big drama. I'm not going to get into it. Huge drama. And it was like an eye opener. It was shocking. And we're still finishing up the fallout from that situation. So
Wow.
Pluto and Aquarius, what is Aquarius all about? Well, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, and Uranus is very similar to the Tower, even though the Tower is ruled by Mars. Um, Pluto and Aquarius is about revolution, it's about rebellion, it is about shaking up and waking up and revolutionizing things so we can move into the future. Now, we've had Pluto and Capricorn for a long damn time,
Yeah.
and Pluto and Capricorn has been, first of all, the United States, Pluto return. I'll be talking about that tonight. I'm not going to get into all the historical stuff right here, but that's been about tearing down structures and governments and traditions. And we've
Mhm.
seen that happening here in the US with all the stuff that's been going on with our government. And now it's going into Aquarius. And Aquarius is about shared power, the collective. It's
Mm.
actually going to be very, very good because the
Mm.
last time Pluto was in Aquarius was during the French Revolution and the American Revolution.
What?
So, yeah, we got a lot of big changes coming. And oftentimes, when you look back on history, everything happens in cycles. And so,
Mhm.
what we're going to be seeing is a lot of advances in technology, medicine,
Oh.
wind power, because Aquarius
Mhm.
is an air sign. We're going to be seeing a lot of things shifting, and the collective is going to have a say with it. And younger folks, this is your time. Speak up, stand up. Let's get it moving. Let's move to the future. The other thing that's going to be happening later this year is Pluto's going to moonwalk back into Capricorn right around the election. And so we're at this really critical point, and you've got a choice. You've got a choice. And I want people to think about that. The big thing that I noticed during the Pluto return for the United States, astrology is always theory. And later on, when you look back, you're like, that's what it meant. And so
Mhm.
I was like, oh, yeah, tearing down government structures. But what happened during the Pluto in Capricorn US Pluto return is our democracy became under threat. And
Mhm.
right now, our democracy is hanging on by a thread. And so when Pluto goes back into Capricorn, we have a choice when we vote. Do we want to go back to a time when things were not equitable for everybody? Do
Yep.
we want to go back to that? Or do we want the future because the country no longer looks like what it looked like back then? It looks
Mhm.
very different. And we have to think very much about now, am I going to vote for democracy or am I voting for authoritarianism? That are our choices because the shadow side of Capricorn and Aquarius, which are both ruled by Saturn, by the way, in traditional rulers, the
Mhm.
shadow side is control.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, what do you want? Do you want to be controlled? Or the other thing, when we look at Aquarius, Aquarius is about freedom, it is about, being your weird. So, we've got a lot to think about. And I think this next vote is going to be incredibly critical. And the fact that it's happening with Pluto back in Capricorn for the last time that we're ever going to see it, we need to think very, very
Wow.
carefully.
Like wow, like there's a test. It's like,
And then
huh.
it goes in Aquarius. Let me tell you this. I just posted something on Instagram. I posted like the lyrics from Mark Bolan's song, The Children of the Revolution. You
Mhm.
can't fool the children of the revolution. So even if people try to go back to a time when women had no choices and all of that, y'all, you can either decide how we want this to look. Do you want this to be where we start making sure of an equitable and just future? Are you going to make people really want to fight for that? Better think very carefully. And I'm not saying that like doom and gloom. I'm not one of those astrologers. I'm just like, we need to be thoughtful because
Mm.
again, with democracy hanging by a thread,
Mhm.
to me, democracy is really incredibly important. In a free society, we want to maintain our freedom. So, y'all, that's what I want you thinking about. Freedom, what does it mean? Not just for you, but for everybody else. How can we ensure that people have the freedom to thrive and that
Yeah.
it's not just a certain people who have the power? How can we share the power? Like Patti Smith said, people have the power. That might be the song for Pluto and Aquarius. But Pluto and Aquarius on its own, look at where it's at in your chart.
Mhm.
And that's going to give you a clue of where you might be receiving a shakeup or a makeup or a wake up. So it's going
Mm.
to be very, very interesting. I'm kind of nervous because of what I experienced this last year, but I'm also ready to roll up my sleeves and do what I got to do to make sure that the revolution for my family, because that's where I'm getting hit, is going to be for the highest good of all concerned.
Yes. I thought The Handmaid's Tale was fiction. I didn't realize it was a possible predictive documentary, you know?
It's really sad.
Though I
Really
will
sad.
say, I did pull 3 cards thinking about what's what's the energy for Pluto moving into Aquarius, and I
Mm.
got some really nice cards. I got 3 of Wands,
Mm. The
9 of
future.
Pentacles,
This is looking good too.
9 of Cups.
This is looking great. And by the way, Kathy down there says we're only free if everyone is free. Amen.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, I'm ready. Let's go. Ah.
We're gonna
Um,
do this.
yeah, and, it's like these brushes with darkness that happen mean that we don't forget.
Yes, and history again always goes in cycles, even our own personal histories.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's make sure we're learning from the lessons of the past, moving forward with wisdom. And that is going to be what we need to do. History doesn't have to repeat itself either. We don't have to go back to those really awful times. And the one thing is, when I used to read for the public, people would always come in when there was terrible things happening in the world or after an election.
Right,
And I
right. Yeah.
always reminded people, hey, humans have always been doing awful things and they're always going to do awful things because there's always somebody who wants power or greed or whatever. So you're always going to have these things happening.
Mhm.
But if we are awake at the wheel, we can minimize it and make sure it doesn't go back to what it did.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. Um, yeah. Whew. Heavy. Heavy. Thank you for this. Um, I always like that quote, like, look to the helpers. It's always when I
Yes.
feel despair for the world or fear, look to the helpers. Oh, I'm emotional. There's a lot of good
Hmm.
people out there, and we're all trying. And I believe goodness will prevail. I
I do
believe.
too. It always does. And there's always, like I said, terrible things that happen, but there's a lot of good that happens, and we never hear about that.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Especially now
Ooh.
with social media. So let's start talking about the good
Woo!
things. Let's support each other. Let's donate. Let's write to our representatives. Let's be kinder. Let's be better. Let's be good
Yeah.
humans.
I'm like, I'm ready to put my tinfoil hat on and have a whole other discussion, but not today. I feel like we should probably, I know you've got a lot going on and I do too. And I just, thank you so much I just love hanging out with you. And
Oh my God,
thank
me
you so
too.
much for hanging. And it's so nice. And um, anything else you want to share about stuff that's going on with you before we close?
Well, I am probably going to be working on another book soon because I have a couple of ideas that I'm brewing. I'm
Hmm.
doing a lot of teaching, and you can find me on Patreon. That's where I do the majority of my teaching. Patreon.com/the Tarot Lady. So check it out. Join me there. I'm teaching for a few more years before I retire, and that's the place to get all my classes. And I do one-off classes here and there. I'm actually going to be in Los Angeles in April, so live
Ooh,
classes. We're working out the details. And you can always keep in contact by signing up for my free newsletter, and that'll let you know what I'm up to, what I'm delivering, and all of that jazz. So
awesome.
that's
Thank
it.
you. Yeah, I've got to get cracking on a book proposal too. It's hard when you see clients because, it's all these little mini interruptions when you're trying to like deep dive. So
Hmm.
that's just my resistance saying, these are the excuses, Jenna, but so I've got that going on myself. And I also, for those of you that are watching, we have like a better two left for our deep play tarot
Mm,
retreat. It's going to be the end of February. It's Tuesday through Sunday. So that last Tuesday of February into the first Sunday of March. Mary Greer is going to be there. Drea Bloom is going to be
yes.
there. I'm going to be there. We have our own little casita. It's 3 buildings around a pool. And we are going to have a great time. I was like, "Ah, I want to invite you, Theresa, but it cannot be Mex. Like if we're gonna do, if I'm like, let's do something cool, it's got to not be somewhere so hot. I know that. I don't know
Yes.
how hot Tulum's gonna be, but for
Too
those of
hot
you
for the
who
tarot lady.
yeah, for those of you that want some of that warmth at the end of February, check it out. We got a couple spaces left. I think they're all going to go very soon, though. And Mary Greer, I cannot. I mean, this is like 12 people max with
Mhm.
Mary. Like, who even Omega doesn't have those ratios. Like, this is very, very special. So if
Mhm.
you wanna work with her and, get up on here, and then go to LA to do your thing. Can you say who you're working with in LA or where? Is
22
that
teachings with Naha Armadi, and I love Naha. Naha is one of my favorite people in the whole world. She is an incredible magician, wonderful human, great tarot reader. I mean, everything she touches, everything she does is magic. So you
mm,
all need to know that. And I taught at 22 teachings a couple years ago, and before the pandemic, it was one of the most magical places I've ever taught at. And so when she said, "Would you come out here?" I said, "I don't travel much. Let me think about that." Duh, of course. And also it's a smaller environment because I won't go anywhere where it is like, if it's more than 50 people, I'm not going to be teaching there. Sorry.
Mhm.
I don't want to get COVID and I can't risk bringing it home. So every
Yeah.
time I make a decision, I have to minimize my risk as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm kind of vibing with the smaller, kind of more intimate spaces right now. Definitely with that, especially with the stuff going on. Um, Everyone, thank you so much for those of you that chimed in. And thank you so much for spending some time with me. This is wonderful. Thank you for your tarot journal, and thank you for really the card you're dealt. It's a beautiful book about how to be a good human with tarot
Mhm.
cards thrown in, and highly recommend everyone grab a copy. All right, folks, have a wonderful weekend and take good care of yourselves and each other. Bye to all of you.
Bye.
Bye.